I want to introduce Alexia and Mariana. They are coming in representation of Fab City project, an initiative, part of the Fab Lab network that many of you might know. And Mariana is gonna explain a little more afterwards. They have both communication and arts background, so that's gonna give us another vision as well of what we have been talking about during the day. So welcome Alexia and Mariana. You should start.
Hi everyone, I wanted to ask if you, back there, you can hear me perfectly? Okay, so welcome to this session. We're going to give you a bit of, we have been listening to amazing approaches, during the conferences this morning. We have been listening to different approaches when it comes to the future of production, distribution and consumption systems. I'm going to tell you a bit about our vision or our approach to it. We come from the Fab Lab network, we come from Fab City, the Fab City initiative, and I just wanted to ask you, so we're going to be talking a bit about Fab Labs and Fab Cities. How many of you have been in a Fab Lab or are familiar with the concept of a Fab Lab? No one. Of course, the MIT, the MIT people. And here. Well, fantastic. So I'm honored to tell you a bit about our world and the vision we have for this, for the gastronomy systems future. So, well, Fab Lab basically comes from the term digital fabrication laboratory, that is basically a space for digital manufacturing with the aid of digital technologies. So right now, I just wanted to introduce you to this map so that you get a grasp of what it looks like today. These are the around 1,000 Fab Labs that we have, a bit more than 1,000 that we have in the network today. You can check the directory at fablabs.io. I can give you the URL later. But basically, I'm going to tell you a short story about this idea. I don't have much time to tell you all the influences in the technology context and the political or social context that gave space to this idea. But what I can tell you is that from the start of digital computation, there was always a foundational question or a pressing question that was one of the building blocks of the field, and it was how to do a digital representation of the world. How do you describe a thing, a system, into math or into digital science that can give you a virtual representation of it, and also to make it programmable, to make it so that you can do different operations with it. We talked about that with the amazing talks about with the MIT ladies this morning, what they are doing to represent climate and make it programmable, so to speak. And many of the talks, I think you're going to see a few connections between the talks of this morning and what I'm going to tell you. So this foundational question, of course, was even more important when it came to the growth of interconnection information systems, because you also had to, once you had represented the world with this new with this electronic language, you had also to talk about that information, to describe that information, so that in interconnected information systems you could do all kinds of different operations with it, and that different systems recognize the information that was flowing from one point to the other. So basically what that brings me to is to get to the core idea of one of the main questions when the Fab Lab was born is, how do you turn things into data and data back into things? And that, in fact, is the main question at the Center for Bits and Atoms at the MIT, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where this idea of the Fab Lab was born. If you want it more formally, the research question that they have is what the content of information is, its physical form, the programmability of these physical systems. So this guy over here, the father of the concept per se, is Neil Gershenfeld. He He is the one that has been pursuing this question so over a long period of time at CBA. He's the director of CBA nowadays, and he had this class or he established this lesson at this class at MIT that was how to make almost anything, because it was part of his research into how, with the growth of information systems, the spread of information systems, the spread of the access to information systems with the internet and now with systems such as the blockchain, how can you how can you translate that? How can you translate that information of the world and into digital information that can travel in between systems, and then bring it back down into physical systems or physical things? So basically, what the question was at one point, what do you need for that to happen? If you have an object and translate that into information, and if you have that information of that object, and you want to bring it down to turn it into the object itself, what do you need for that to happen? It sounds a bit like the Jetsons, no? You have like a big black machine where you just press the button and a table appears. So that's where the idea of a Fab Lab came. So the question that was or the question that was behind this is, what space do I need? Which kind of space do I need to make this operation happen? To be able to have digital information that I can turn into things and then back into digital information. So that space, or the outline of that space, is what we call a Fab Lab. Of course, you know, there are many maker spaces, hacker spaces, regular workshops, wood workshops, metal workshops, but what he tried to standardize is which tools do I need, which basic tools which tools do I need so that I can make almost anything. So, well, a Fab Lab nowadays has a certain guideline or certain machines that allow you to perform different digital manufacturing operations, or at least to prototype things that you want to make. So there are 3D printers and CNC milling machines and regular workshop tools and paint and needles and nails and electronics. So there are a few components that make up a Fab Lab that will guarantee that you can prototype almost anything there. And with that in mind, if you have a standardized or a regular guideline for this, if you have it spread around the world with similar conditions, so if I can make a table with these tools in Barcelona, in a Fab Lab in South Africa, am I going to be able to fabricate that same table? That's what the network is seeking, to create or to lay out an infrastructure where information can travel, so information on how to make things can travel, but it can be manufactured locally. So what does that mean? That chair doesn't necessarily have to be shipped. So this is where the conversation starts to get interesting, no? Because we were talking earlier today, we are moving into a world where we want information to travel, not objects per se. We want to be able to print things, to build things with local materials, right? To be able to bring waste from local production cycles back into the production chain. And this is where it gets interesting. So, yeah, that was the slide I was going to move to. But what happens if you have that information? Well, the information travels and not the table per se. So, and also when this amazing spread of Fab Labs started to happen, it's not that the CBA is opening Fab Labs all over the world. This is regular people that open up a makerspace, and then they follow a certain guidelines and apply to become part of the network, because they say, okay, we have the infrastructure, we have the machines, we have the education or the accessibility guidelines that are stated in the Fab Lab charter. So they are welcome to. They are accepted to be in the network. But what happens when you start to have 5, 6, or 1, 2, or 3 of these fab labs in a city. And also what happens when you also have maker spaces and hacker spaces? What kind of ecosystem does that create? What does it do to a city? What changes in a city? So that's when another important question came or was born. How does this change cities? This is happening, this is in front of us. Cities will change. And that's where the Fab City vision was born. Out of that question of, can we bring the ethos of this open source community, of this distributed production network, infrastructure, knowledge, people around the world, can we bring this into thinking differently about the future of cities? Can we do that? And the answer was the Fab City initiative, that is the one that I'm representing today. And it's basically to make it, I don't have much time today to explain in depth, but basically the idea is very simple. We want to change from a paradigm of the city as a linear trash machine, what we call product in, trash out. What you see in cities is that the city is like an octopus, that it's constantly with its tentacles bringing in materials, people, extractive supply chains from all kinds, and returns waste or produces waste, trash. And of course the panel or the different futures that this waste generation spell are not very positive, or not positive at all. So what can we do to think about this from the infrastructure that we are creating? So I wanted to show you this map. I don't know if you are, you can see that from back there, but it's basically what happens when this is the Poblenou neighborhood in Barcelona that we call the Fab City prototype, because it's an ecosystem that is bringing together all these elements that I'm talking about. It's not just an idea, it's something that is real and that is happening. These are different stakeholders and different maker spaces and different fab labs that are creating new economic ecosystem in this neighborhood. So we can ask, what can we create? Hyperlocal production strategies, civic engagement, small-scale intervention, even flexible factories. Can the neighborhood produce what it needs? Can the waste of the neighborhood recirculate inside the neighborhood and be turned into things again that the neighborhood needs? So those are the questions that we are asking, and those are the questions that we are trying to answer via this very interesting ecosystem that is being born, or that it's already maturing in the Poblenou. And basically, you go from a linear trash machine to go to a data in, data out model. As you can see, well, this is a typical spiral economy scale based economy, where you have from domestic production, when we talk about 3D personalized fabricators or 3D printing or the future of synthetic biology, where you go to maybe social fabrication. What if each neighborhood has a fab lab where the neighbors can produce what they need? Or maybe, for example, there is a restaurant in the Poblenou that was entirely fabricated in the fab lab 100 meters away. So this starts to become an interesting question about what a fab lab can do for the neighborhood. But also you have advanced and clean industry. How can you engage these different scales from the domestic production to the social fabrication to the advanced industry? Those are the questions that we are trying to ask. We have partnered with IKEA, and we are trying to figure out how this future might look like. How a fab lab in a neighborhood can work with IKEA to create a different way of managing supply chains and waste, and reintroducing it to the chain. And of course, you have global supply chains. That's not something that it's not going to change, but you can try to rethink what those different stages can do for the chain. So basically, this is what we have after 200 years of industrial revolution, where you have extraction that is perhaps coming from a global south country, and the final waste that is maybe coming back also to that global south country. and we want to move into a spiral production ecosystem, can we have cities that have circular fabrication strategies, and where you have a data exchange in what we call a zero container economy, where what travels is information and not things? Can we reduce the carbon footprint that way? What effect will this have for the world? So, yeah, to sum up, what the Fab City is a global initiative to change the paradigm of the current industrial economy, so that materials recirculate inside the city, and knowledge how to make things travel internationally or globally. The community has grown upon a basis of open source knowledge, open source tools, and it has been an ethos of the community and of the infrastructure per se, the tools, the blueprints, the things that are made in Fab Labs, and that creates also an open source environment for knowledge to circulate and to maybe create or invite people to create local solutions to local needs with the tools that they have at hand. So we truly believe that citizens can be empowered to invent and prototype local solutions to local needs with their own materials, with their own waste, with their own situations, giving them space, tools, and knowledge to encourage that. So we also believe that there's a resilience increases. We're trying to figure out which kind of indicators we can create from our vision of this paradigm to try to measure how the maker community or how the Fab Lab community or how the maker spaces and hacker spaces add to the city's resilience. So that's also one thing we're trying to look for the future, how we can measure this and what impact indicators we can create from this. So yeah, basically it's a new economy based on circular and distributed tools and knowledge for locally productive and globally connected cities. That this is basically what sums up what we are trying to do. I just wanted to close with a question that I like to ask. If you could make almost anything in a lab, what would it be? What do you think it would be? And also just to close this segment of mine, if you could grow almost anything in a lab, what would you grow? Because the next stage, or what's coming for us, is not just how to make almost anything, but how to grow almost anything. Synthetic biology is going to bring about a huge revolution in how things are made, how things are programmed. So that's, for example, in the Fab Lab network, within the network of Fab Labs, we have this educational program called the Fab Academy, where you have 5 months of training into all the tools of digital fabrication and all that you can do with the infrastructure of Fab Lab. And the next stage that is already a reality is the Bio Academy. How can you grow almost anything? Yeah, so that's it. I'm going to leave you with Alexia. She's going to give you some ideas for what's coming next.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. And just to clarify as well, my name is Alexia, and I am an artist and PhD researcher who has been collaborating with the Fab Lab in Barcelona. And part of what I've been looking at is the role of arts and design in asking some of these questions and helping to facilitate some of these visions that we have. Rather than just focusing on technology, what do we want the technology to do and why? So that's a bit of my background within this. And what I wanted to propose to you today, we have an activity that I will outline on what you're going to be doing today, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a starting point for how artists and designers have been not only addressing some of these issues and concerns, but also helping to drive the technology forward. This is an example from a design group based in Amsterdam called Next Nature. I don't know if many of you are familiar with them, but they have come up with this speculative project called In Vitro Meat. And so similar to some of the questions that were raised earlier today, what might it mean to grow meat in a laboratory in order to address some of the issues that we face around sustainability and meat production? But how do you shape the culture around that? It's not just a technology issue, it's a cultural issue. So they came up with this pookie, which is, it's a pork product, but those of you from the States will probably be familiar with Nestle Toll House cookie dough that you can buy, right? So the idea is it's a kind of a ready-made cookie dough you just slice off and bake. Here you can do it with your meat, if you want to. And as we saw earlier in the presentations, we actually have a lab-grown burger that costs $330,000. So one of the issues around it is also the prohibitive cost of some of these things. How do we start to rethink it? Next Nature also came up with a speculative project they called the Nano Supermarket, looking at nanotechnologies. And one of the speculative projects they have within that is this nano wine. And the idea is that there are nanoparticles in the wine that you can activate, you can turn on or off according to your particular emotional state and what you fancy. So those nanoparticles that you don't activate pass through the body, and those particles that you do want to activate might make you feel happy, and you can taste a Syrah or whatever it is that you want to see. So it's that idea of customization that they're playing with. Going to a real situation with wine, Ava Winery is a company that's looking at, what if we didn't need to grow grapes? What if wine wasn't made from grapes, but actually we just looked at its molecular structures and we replicated wine, we made wine based off of its molecular components? And how does that relate to ideas of standardization too, where you're not necessarily reliant upon there being a good crop, but we can just reproduce what we want from the chemical level? Another actual company, Ecovative, is a design company in the US that looks at, they grow biodegradable packing materials using mycelium. Do you know what, are people familiar with the use of mycelium, mushroom roots? Yeah? So this is an idea of also kind of looking at how do we not only use biodegradable materials, but what is the relationship between systems? So you've got not only the wine production, but then the wine shipping, and how can we think about sustainability all the way through? So this is an alternative to styrofoam, using sawdust and inoculating it. You create a form for whatever shape you want, fill it with the sawdust and inoculate it with mycelium, and allow it to take that form, and then you kill it off essentially. But it produces a very sturdy and lightweight material that can be used for packing materials, furniture, etc. Daisy Ginsberg is an artist and designer who teamed up with the iGEM project. Have many of you heard of that who are into synthetic biology? Yes, a few? No, sorry. It is an undergraduate competition looking at the future of a university competition, looking at the future of synthetic biology. It teams up students in the biological sciences with artists and designers to come up with speculative possibilities of what, again, kind of leading off with what Mariana was saying, what would we grow? What would we do? So this is a project that looks at developing, have you heard of Yakult? Are you familiar with that? The kind of the probiotic shot that you can take, and the idea is that it releases probiotics that travel into your intestines, good for gut flora, etc. So what Daisy and the team did was they kind of speculated on the modification of E. coli bacteria. It's a very easy bacteria to modify. What if we made E. chromai? So we modified the bacteria so that when it, in your intestinal tract, when it comes into contact with certain things that are indicators of disease, your stool reflects the color, changes color according to the disease. So, and you have a home diagnostic kit. So it's basically these horrible looking colored poos that you kind of measure your stool against. So it looks at food as a form of diagnostic tool as well, and how you essentially transform your home into a healthcare practice. This is speculative, I should say. Evolva is a company that's playing around with synthetic biology and modifying yeast to express particular scents. There's quite a trend in this, particularly around things like vanilla and its component of vanillin, and it's very expensive. So looking at if we can modify yeast to express vanilla at a lower cost, how does that then make it easier for us to access vanilla? And I want to show you a socially engaged art project that I think is also important to consider in terms of the context of food that we've been discussing. Conflict Kitchen was started in Pittsburgh, and it's a project that involves artists working with community members, usually from immigrant communities, of places where the US is in conflict with, where the government is in conflict. And the idea is that you're creating street food that stimulates the sharing of traditions and recipes from the immigrant community into the arts community and then into the wider community. And when you order this food, it usually comes in some sort of wrapper that gives you a bit more of a description and a context for the situation and invites you to engage in dialogue around it. So the social role that food plays as well is really important to consider. We also wanted to kind of bring in this idea of heritage. Each of your tables, by the way, are themed. So there are some examples that relate to each one of your objectives. But the Svalbard Seed Bank, are we familiar with this? Probably most people, right? So up in the Arctic, collecting various seeds. But one of the issues that it's facing too is with climate change, it's all melting up there. So what do we do to preserve our current food culture, our past food culture, and thinking about what we would do for our future food culture? Infarm is a company that has been building these little hydroponic farms within grocery store settings. This one happens to be in Berlin. So the idea we were kind of talking about, where is food grown and where is it purchased? Here's a kind of collision of the two. And from our home in Barcelona, the Aqua Pioneers, this was it's an aquaponics system that works with fish and water and plants. And this was the result of a Fab Academy project that Mariana had mentioned the program. Some students went through the project and developed this system, and now they're crowdfunding to make it completely available so that you can download the plans, build your own system. And they're also looking at working with various schools in the Barcelona area, the local authority, different agencies to look at how can they be supporting that Fab City initiative as well. Really quickly. And looking at, I believe that it was mentioned earlier by Franz about where are things being grown and looking at the oceans as a place that we're going to be farming. So kelp farms that are deliberately planted, in part because kelp helps to deacidify the ocean waters. The higher the acidity, we have issues where crustaceans can't grow shells, etc. So actually we're looking at deliberately farming as both a food source and to help reduce some of the acidity issues that we face. Blanche and Schock are food designers based in London, and they have just been working on a project with the Wellcome Trust in London, which is a science, art, medical kind of research organization. And they were looking at the impact of refrigeration, how that's changed the way that we think about where food can be grown and transported. So how will that be different for us in 2050? Center for Genomic Gastronomy, crop cover cuisine. What if we now are thinking about deliberately planting plants that are traditionally used as crop covers that we wouldn't eat, that kind of in-between planting, in between the crops that we would normally grow, but if we switch the culture around our cuisine and this is actually what we were eating. Or I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the self-made cheese project. Christina Agapakis and Cecil Tolas did a project where they collected yeast and bacteria from people's bodies and made cheese out of it. So do we become our own producers of our cheese? I don't know. And then finally, the Center for Genomic Gastronomy does a smog tasting project where meringue is mostly air. So they go into various urban contexts and whip up the meringue, and therefore the air that's in the meringue has all of the chemical compounds that are found in our air. So the recipe here, the kind of listing includes soot, dust, sulfur, etc. So can food be seen as a kind of environmental indicator as well? Also challenging our ideas about what we consider native and what we consider invasive species. This is the Cooking Sections Collective that, for a project in Glasgow, made Japanese knotweed ice cream in order to deal with the problem that we have in the UK of the prevalence of Japanese knotweed. So how do we start to reframe our relationships to these species? And finally, Soylent is a real product. How many of you know about Soylent Green, the movie, right? Yeah. So why they would name it this, I'm not quite sure. But Soylent is looking at purely from the nutritional level, delivering food as a nutritional resource. So it's a drink, they have it in various forms, but you are just ingesting it to get the required daily allowance of all of your nutrition needs. So this is to set you up for what you are going to be doing over the next hour or so. One of the things that we've been asking with Project Gastronomia, with the Fab City initiative and through the arts and design, is looking at how can gastronomy support a vision of a 100% sustainable world, healthy and full of flavor. And so at each table you have a large worksheet that you're going to be working through that gives you a kind of overall context of how do we imagine the next generation gastronomy system. What's involved in that system? What's the aim of the system? Who's involved with it? Where does it take place? This is an opportunity. I want to encourage you to suspend disbelief, have fun, make it crazy, do what you need to do. But really we're looking at how do we take some of the things that were discussed this morning, some of the examples I've just shown you from the arts and design context to kind of push forward what is the vision that we want, supporting a notion of a world that is 100% sustainable, and what is gastronomy's role within that. So we've identified major shifts to come that are based upon major shifts that are actually currently happening within the gastronomy industry, different systems and directions for that, areas of change, which is the big circle on your diagram of who's involved, what's involved, where does gastronomy take place, and you're going to be working on this in order to develop a configuration of a new gastronomy system. Stop me at any time if you're completely confused, by the way. So here are your objectives, beyond having fun. Having fun is number one. We want you to envision and describe the potential gastronomy system or scenario by articulating a given set of from the area of change model, a given set of criteria that you're pulling from that. You are going to encourage a valuable discussion about the future of gastronomy and food through a systems thinking approach. As we discussed all day, we can't approach the next generation gastronomy system in isolation. It is linked with all other systems. So how do we see it as part of a larger ecosystem? And we want you, within this, to reflect on the meaning of the word gastronomy. That was already posed a little bit earlier today, but to kind of question what does gastronomy mean for us moving forward? And how can we encourage new understandings of the term? What we're looking for is, from each table, we're going to be gathering an outcome that consists of 7 different, you're not going to do 7 narratives. From all the tables, we'll have a total of 7 narratives or visual representations of gastronomy systems. So you can work this out however you want to. You can draw, there's post-its, you can write text, however you want to work it out. But how would you imagine a next generation gastronomy system using this model based on your themes? So I've got here, so this is a starting point for hacking the system. And you can add from this, but it's a starting point. So we've got the major shifts. We've got a little y-axis here. So you've got major shifts, and then you have on the right-hand side, next-gen gastronomy systems directions. With the convergence, you have new possibilities. So what we're asking you to do is to select a major shift, at least one. If you want to work with more than one, that's totally fine. But if you're thinking about, for example, new transactions and matching that up with next generation gastronomy systems that are locally embedded, what does that look like? And then you're ultimately developing the new possibility for that. Does that make sense? You take one or more from a major shift, one or more from the potential, from the directions in order to develop your new possibility. This is also a starting point for hacking. You've got your areas of change that speaks to the objects, the peoples and roles, the spaces, raw materials and resources, and you also have other categories. So if there's something that you want to add to that that's not there, go ahead and do it. And I should point out too, we've got on your table some sheets that have little provocations and a little bit more description for you to go into for each of these major shifts and directions. Each table has a theme. We have food and inequality, which asks how might a next generation gastronomy system contribute to equality? Food and clean water and energy. How might a next generation gastronomy system ensure clean water and sustainable energy? Food and well-being. How might it contribute to a wider understanding of well-being, and not just physical well-being? We'll challenge you to think of well-being as another term to be interrogated. Food and biodiversity. What roles might biodiversity play in this next generation gastronomy system? Food and heritage. How might a next gen gastronomy system coexist with heritage? And again, interrogating that idea of heritage. Heritage is not just something that's fixed in the past, but it is on a continuum, and how do we want to contribute to our future heritage? Food and massive migration of both people and species. And food and synthetic biology. What roles might synthetic biology play in a next generation gastronomy system? So you'll be working with your specific theme, again towards a 100% sustainable world. Pick at least one major shift, one next gen system, and use that to structure the way that you're developing your system. Is that fairly clear? Any questions so far? No? So we're cutting our timeline a little bit because the day has run over a little bit, but what we'd like you to do is we're gonna leave you to your own devices in a minute. We'll stop talking. But introduce yourselves to one another at the table, which is a really quick introduction to who you are and what your background and interest in gastronomy is. And then you're gonna have we'll probably do about 45 minutes instead of an hour, I'm thinking, for idea generation and narrative development. So we're not asking you to come up with a fully fleshed out brand new system. What we're asking you to do is start the process for how we're going to think about this. And then crucial at the end, we'd like to have a group presentation. So you'll have somebody from your group that will present what you came up with to all of us. And then we'll have an opportunity for a wrap up and discussion.
So what we're going to do now is you should have a representative at each table that would be willing to present what you came up with your scenario. Just a brief 2 minutes or so of what you came up with. So if you could talk about the major shift that you chose, whether that was from one of the given major shifts or if you developed your own, and the next gen gastronomy system direction, and then how you worked that out around your theme. Yeah?
2 minutes. Hi, I'm Larry. We have decided to build a 20,000-foot food care institute building directly related to this university. We want it financially sustainable, so we have appointed a director of media relations who is going to enter into a 5-year contract, which will directly relate to the Internet of Food. We wish to marry the bridge between food and health and address functional issues in medicine relating to the cost of healthcare and the inability for graduate doctors to continue to grow in knowledge and especially in food. It's very important that we present facts, data, details, and information. So Jose has agreed to be the Chief Science Officer to contribute both the full resources of the university from a language as well as a science and innovation standpoint. Dell has agreed to be our new Director of Innovation. She is going to be responsible for geographic jurisdictions annually in terms of both digital objectives annually, but we continue to measure our results based upon the sustainability. So we are going to be signing a 15-year lease with this university. We want to promote our education and our direct relation to the Internet of Food. Dr. Hoffman is going to be our Director of Education. I'm going to hand the mic over in a minute. She'll describe some of the courses. And this troublemaker who started it all is going to be our Chief Executive Officer, and he's going to take his healthy diet and his lack of alcohol to all measures of high scale in education, and we'll work directly with our Director of Media Relations as we continue to grow virtually in each geographic and language-based area, keeping fully in mind our mission that our objective is to marry through language skills, art and history with science, technology, and medicine as food. Food is medicine. And Josh has agreed to be our Director of Liaison, both with Chambers of Commerce in and outside of geographic boundaries, and has agreed to be a point man in our mission objective to align fully with medicine and the disconnect with the food industry. So in terms of financing on a sustainable basis, every 5 years we will either change the contract. This will be an institute that can put a second floor on as the program continues to grow, but our objective is to create a brand that will be sustainable, so that, like Grand Canyon University was in big trouble in 2011 and now has 75,000 online students, both graduate medical physicians and people in the food industry will continue to upgrade their skills. In terms of education, I'll let Isabel finish it off.
Oh, very quickly. Okay, so we decided that we're going to offer courses in chemistry, biology, nutrigenomics, respect for food and animals, food science, cooking science, nutritional science, sensor science, food chain understanding, cooking healthily, microbiome, food as treatment for health, food as a waste, food waste reduction techniques, new agricultural techniques, alternatives to proteins, and so on and so on and so on.
In conclusion, those of you who are in the room will give you a 15% off for your tuition. Thank you very much.
Biodiversity. For the major shifts to come, we chose access over ownership, and we threw out automated and just chose interconnected everything. And then the next gen gastronomy system directions we chose were empowering many people, as NGGS is, as health and well-being institutions and providers, and as collectors of the past. So rather than develop a plan for a specific thing, we have a narrative about several people that are actors in this system, and Matthew and I will be relating them to you. So we start with Pablo. Pablo is a vegan. He grows heirloom chickpeas inside the walls of his flat in Barcelona.
Next we have Maria. Maria is Pablo's lover. She works for Trawfish, an international NGO developing recipes for trash fish that are grown in the marshes of the Milpas. They eat the chickpea shells that Pablo brings over every week, and she pays him in something spicy.
And then Mercedes is Pablo's wife, because in 2050 we'll all be in polyamorous triads. She's also Maria's lover. So she's an activist. She has taken it upon herself to start and run a living seed vault on the milpa. And if you're not familiar with a milpa, it is a sort of a floating farm on top of a marsh that developed in ancient Mexico City.
That milpa is actually owned by Tito, and the milpa is actually the Huelva milpa, and known as the Huelvilpa, famous for containing crops from the New and Old World. And Tito teaches an online course on agriculture and seed breeding, and his students are all growing new varieties of these seeds in food computers and modeling climates of other milpas.
So Justine is an American student. She is Tito's best student. She's also a prominent social media influencer who tweets and blogs to get people into Tito's videos. She also has an Instagram account about the biodiversity choco parties that she throws.
So Heinrich saw some of Justine's tweets and some of Tito's videos and decided that he would meet up with Justine at Burning Man Festival, and they developed the Biodiversity Choco Camp and he started using his German beer making skills to develop wild fermented beers from wild herbs and rye grains for bread flavor. And
Okay, so all of them together, but particularly Heinrich and Justine at Burning Man, organized a biodiversity meeting to make a food biodiversity open internet of food at the Basque Culinary Center. And that is where we leave.
just want to say thank you to our team for everybody putting amazing input into the character development of all this here.
Yeah, we have a really pretty picture over here that y'all can come see later. So we designed Choco, which is a gastronomic civil service for 2050. And we are, our theme was food and massive migrations. So we went all idea over here. I hope you appreciate this, Linda and Rachel. And we decided we would like to focus on a major shift of new transactions with next-gen gastronomy system directions that empower many people as shared goods, assets, or potential workplaces for social innovation and as drivers of belonging. We found that some of the challenges we thought most folks who were part of massive migrations into the new urban 2050 probably felt a lot of cultural baggage, personal cultural baggage of not knowing being the strongest feeling of this, and that there was the opportunity for a business case that might come out of this. And then we talked a lot about the idea of a shared but slightly neutral space in every community that is a place where folks who are part of the how do we want to refer to these guys? The welcoming culture welcomes folks from migrating cultures into a neutral space where they, the welcoming culture then prepares food, is given institutional support and infrastructure from the government, including information about safety net services. Folks in the welcoming culture are required at some point as part of their civil service to travel to a place that is part of the migrant culture in their societies and or gets education or has some sort of educational experience about folks who are part of the migrant culture. And after they go through this education and or required travel, they provide a meal to someone, to one person in a choco. And it's at that space where they share information, they share a sort of cultural bond, and this is part of the welcoming act. And then once, this is the first step in the process, and then the last step of Choco is that the person who is part of the welcoming culture then opens up their home, and the person who is of the migrant culture prepares a meal for them in this person's home. And that also then helps continue the sharing experience around food, so that informs the first step, which is this sort of government institutional support where folks of the migrating culture are also then informing the education and the information that's shared to the welcoming community about their culture. So it's using gastronomy or gastronomia as a civil service, and everybody's required to participate as part of a welcoming culture. That is Choco.
Okay, so we're just going to build on that theme there, Hildreth. We have, we're going to build on that one. So our theme was food and inequality. Our shift was access over ownership. And new system is shared goods, assets, and places for social innovation. So this is the 2050 Choco, and it's in San Francisco. I didn't pick that. But the reason why we chose San Francisco is because there's a large class divide. It's very diverse, and there's also kind of low tech and high tech. So we liked the challenge of picking a society that was quite diverse. We're hoping to address with our 2050 Choco lack of access to basic needs, energy efficiency, food waste, hyperlocal production, and just being independent, culinary confidence. So we really push this, inspired by the Uber model, push us to a place where imagining what if we didn't actually own kitchens or food in our homes. So this imagines a scenario where there is no kitchens in your home. There's only a community center, probably the size of maybe your local library. Maybe it hosts about 50 families. It's kind of on a forced membership fee, i.e. tax maybe, but it really operates as a community center. So the idea is that really people are coming together, managing how they are cooking and also how much they're needing to source, because this is also a closed loop system. So from a waste standpoint, water collection, naturally we need a food computer because only food grown on the property is what we're using. So complete system. We also like this idea of multiple of these locations do have a connection. So there's a catalog of recipes, there's efficiencies being shared to keep working on these isolated buildings. Yeah, that's it. That's our 2050 program.
Our group, I will read, is food and clean water and energy. So our group has been very controversial. I think that we have some alignment, some not alignment, but I will explain you. So the first thing is we work with a fact. And the fact is that we can get food and clean water and energy, more sustainable environment if we change the protein from meat and from vegetable from 80 to 20. You understand what I mean? So 80 right now from meat to 80 from vegetable. So this is our vision, okay? This is where we align. Yes? Yes, okay, good. So afterwards, well, the difficult thing is how to achieve this in 50 years. So what we also align, so 2 alignments, that is that the key point is to get the compromise and the alignment of key opinion leaders. And key opinion leaders for this is top chefs. Okay? Because they are influencing the foodies, they are influencing after all the community, all the population. So how to train these people to make this change. So how to train them, how to convince them to cook in that way. So what we think about is to have a culinary school to teach these people, to train them, to convince them, to introduce this in the restaurants. Introducing this in the restaurants, they will influence the foodies and the foodies the rest. So this is what we align, and this is something that came from Albert, so maybe you want to add something because you are working on this. So this is a reality. This is something that he is managing, and it started, you told me that it's not easy, but little by little is being introduced in Holland, okay? So this is one thing. And the other thing that here, I think that we have some cultural differences. For me, it's more simple to understand because I'm coming from Spain, maybe from other cultures that are more UK or other countries that are not so culinary, traditionally, it's more difficult. But I believe what you say, this group, so to have a kind of community where people transmit the culinary tradition from mothers to children. So I really believe in this. I know that it's not so simple, but for me it's different. The people wants to feed themselves or to nourish themselves. So this is the other part of the 2 pillars that we have. And I think that that's all. No? Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Our topic was food and synthetic biology. We have big discussion. Actually, we spent our time discussing what's synthetic biology. I think we didn't have an agreement, but anyway, we spoke about, well, there is no difference between artificial and natural, and then we spoke about the next generation gastronomy system directions in relation with health and well-being. We created an antidepressant food that works with a bacteria that lives in your gut and is activated by some food, that in this case we decided was chocolate. We had 10 different basic life forms depending on your genetic makeup. We accept that in 2050 everybody will have their genetic profile done. So depending on your genetic profile, you will have access to one kind of bacteria that has one kind of antidepressant activity. This would be produced in laboratories, but then they could send you home, or you could get this food in a next generation restaurant that would be very well regulated, also through this genetic profiling, that so they know what kind of food you have right to access. And well, we have some questions about access equality, that we don't know if this will be cheap, or this will be something that everybody could get easily, or if it will be accepted, because maybe, I don't know, some people would think that this is like taking drugs. It's not like regulated like a medicine. And well, we have also questions about the business model. Well, we also say that in 2 days, with your genetic profile, you would know what kind of bacteria you could have, and more or less that's it. That's what we got.
Thank you so much.
We have like a character. We have designed a character. It's called like Dog. He lives in the city. So he's very used to grow vegetables in the rooftop with her husband, also her neighborhood, in the neighborhood. So he's, we have agreed that the concept of the past is going to change in the next years, because the new people is going to understand the past in different ways. It's not going to be like a very analogic past. It's going to merge the digital and the analogic part. So we think that there are going to be like two directions in the next heritage and food systems. We think that the 20% of the market is going to be like heritage, and it's going to talk about my own election. So we have make a bridge with the music sector, because we think that all of us consume like heritage music and also pop music. So we think the folk food, for example, is going to be like a big hashtag for this topic, because all of us consume heritage music or folk music in a slow way, and in the same way we consume like a rapid music or pop music in the same moment. So for us, it's like a combined in the same. And we have talked also about the traceability of the food, thinking about how different systems like Bitcoin have transformed the economies of the economies, and how that topic is going to change the food by itself. And we think that every food is going to have like its own footprint, and all the people is going to know what that food, where it's made and when. And we have talked about different topics like your Facebook heritage, what is the food you consume, and I don't know, anything else? I think it's okay. And he's like very tight.
Amazing. I want to thank you for participating in this, and as we're wrapping up, make a few final comments around the interconnections between all of these groups. I think there are some really great crossovers, and it demonstrates the way that the different topics can actually work together in order to start to imagine what a gastronomy system actually is, the role that it plays in society, the role that we want it to play in society. But I'd also like to throw it out there to you guys. What are some challenges that you face with this? What are some surprises? And maybe what are some next steps that you feel that, although we were talking about 2050, what are some things that we might be able to start doing today to work towards some of these visions? We could start with a choco. Anything?
That's a great question. More events like this.
More events like this?
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Way to tag on.
And the next one, we'll keep building upon these starting points.
So build our hopes. Anything else?
Events like this should be more diverse.
Yeah.
There should be people from all over the world at these events.
Well, there are people from all over the world, but I agree with also different backgrounds and different different stakes within it. Maybe, yeah.
Well, we're dealing with the non-developed world,
Yeah.
and
Yes, no, that's true.
from the developed world. So.
That's true. Any other comments?
And obviously next time should be in a choco.
Brilliant. Anything else? Jose, do you want to say anything as a closing?
I was thinking that this could become like a fab network model of chocos around the world.
That's good.
Project Gastronomía Chocos. That'd be awesome. With an intranet and everything, and all the web semantic, and Matthew helping us with the Internet of Food.
Absolutely.
And what? And what?
Anti-depression chocolate.
Antidepressive chocolate.
As well, yes. It's a replicable model, would be nice. Yes.
Anyone else? No? So this closes it up. What are we doing next for the bus?
What are we doing next is we're hearing a few words from Asier and Jose Mari. Please, I will invite you here. They have represented a very important support in the setting up of all this event. And yeah.
Thank you. It's undeserved honor. Well, I was just thinking, back into the last themes. If you look around at what people has in common, mostly to develop personally and also as economy, it's actually not food, it's actually energy. Going back to the point here. You look around, electricity, energy hasn't been cool for the last 30, 40 years. Even people at MIT kind of abandoned the theme for the last 30 years as an area of research. I'm talking about grid transmission. And you look even in the US, the transmission on the grid, all the infrastructure hasn't been developed since the 50s. What that meant is it was not cool until the fourth industrial revolution came, and something that is so transversal became an area of revolution. Now we're talking about producing in your own home, actually sticking into the grid. We're talking about smart grids. We're talking about producing off grid as an aisle, or actually producing centrally. It's a whole new world there. Back in food, same thing. You have these scores 20 years ago, and I'm thinking vertically. Talking about agriculture, who was dedicated to agriculture? Yes, underdeveloped people from small places. You will do the semantic research, what you associate with agriculture. It will be backwards, it will be isolation, it will be something that is not cool anymore. Something very common to gastronomy to an extent. Who did actually dedicate themselves for gastronomy? Or like people who were high school dropouts. You wouldn't dream of a university dedicated to gastronomy. You wouldn't dream of people doing their PhD, their masters, dedicated to gastronomy. Come again, there's a fourth industrial revolution. And here we are talking from the Internet of Things to actually, using nanotechnology, to then using semantic analysis, talking about food computers, talking about should it be centralized production, should it be actually kilometer zero production. So it's a whole new brave world there. And in a very similar manner, and probably for me that's the most important factor to see if this really is a trend and if it's an edgy subject. If you look around in a room, how many people are actually wearing designer glasses. So that means actually this is a pretty edgy subject. So many of us are wearing. Just look at yourselves around. So jokes aside, there's one difference between the different areas that are coming in this fourth industrial revolution. Some of them are already very established. That's why I started with energy. I mean, energy is bringing a whole new revolution, but the big actors are there, the big stakeholders are there. It's very difficult, and it's not necessary to create communication. It's not necessary to create new nodes. It's not necessary to create new hubs, because they already existed for 200 years. Gastronomy, food, and I mean, although there are obviously some exceptions, but in general, it's a brand new world. So creating meeting points like this one, and I'm saying this in whole modesty of what Project Gastronomy is intended to be, but creating a place, a meeting points, hubs, in which the different stakeholders of this new world of gastronomy, and I'm thinking of food, again, from agriculture all the way to using big data, to doing restaurant, just giving an example, a silly example, restaurant bookings. It requires to create these new bridges, it requires to create these new relationships, it requires to bring all these stakeholders together. So thank you for being here in this first step of creating this little hub, these little stakeholders at Project Gastronomia. Thanks to a lot of people here, but particularly to Jose, is intending to be. Today is just the first step in, I think it's going to be a quite interesting path. So once again, mil esker, muchas gracias, thank you very much.
Okay, from my side also, thank you. I mean, we have designed an event to talk about technology, but when you start talking about, in this afternoon about food, at the end you talk about values, ideology, philosophy, like many elements that are in the base of our food choices, of our food system. And Project Gastronomy at the end, it's an initiative that wants to be a collective movement. So that's why it's so important to have these connections, to have, and at the same time, because we believe, and it's clear, we cannot tackle food system issues if we go in from our disciplines. So we have to work more interdisciplinary from different positions from our chain, from different positions of education, industry, research. So that was the first step. We will continue. It's for us, I think it makes sense to have this kind of events, not only here presentially, but also online, to keep, we would like very much to keep the connections, to find ways of working together. We will organize more events. I think Jose will be happy to do that. But also we would like to travel to organize these events, not here, but in any place that makes sense, and probably it will make sense because we can do with you. So let's keep in touch, and we will work together for, I think it's for a better food system. Thank you very much.
So just yes, thank you all for coming. I'm really happy with this outcome, which we started to create, actually to think about it from the last year, but started to sprint on it this year. And yeah, I really hope that the second one is gonna happen, and that we will keep building upon those things. And then in the coming days, our team, the people that you have seen with these t-shirts, we're gonna be working on gathering all these conclusions. Everything is recorded and we're gonna upload it in a web page. And we're gonna be very happy to share all that information with you guys, and we're gonna be very happy with you guys sharing that information as well, spreading the message. And we'll see you in the second edition, right?